Gary's doing a twofer, so he's sneaking 2 talks into the 1 hour slot.
I was requested.
Squeezing at my request.
So I'm in the economics department. After these talks, you probably wonder why. In fact, I don't really consider myself an economist, but that's what my degree says. So basically, I got my start doing laboratory experiments, and as you'll see from these talks, I've kind of ventured a little bit out of the lab and changed the methodology a bit. So I'm going to do 2 talks. The first one, I guess I can figure out how to do this. Let's see this. And view show. Okay, this is the first talk. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to handle questions. I tend to like a lot of interactions, but I've been warned not to have too much interaction or I'll never finish. So I guess I'll settle for clarifying questions. If you don't understand what I'm talking about or what I did, please ask and I'll try to explain it for you. I guess I'd like to save the long expositional discussions until afterward. That was the recommendation I was given. So this is a paper co-authored with Aldo Rusticchini, who you may have heard of. Aldo does all sorts of interesting stuff. He does a lot of neuro. He's doing genetics and preferences. Again, you might wonder why he's considered an economist. He's actually a mathematician. So what did we do? Oh, motivation. Well, I guess to give a little bit of motivation before I say what we did. What we basically did, though, is we looked at a particular game, which is the prisoner's dilemma. We adapted our design from a previous paper where you have an audience. So you'll have one person, you'll have a table like this. You'll have one person sitting on this side, one person sitting on this side, one person sitting on this side, and you'll have an audience consisting of people from this person's group sitting behind him or her and observing, and they're interested bystanders because they share in the payoffs. So we did this in a previous paper, and we found effects of group membership. And it was kind of new stuff for economics. So we took this, and what we did instead of the plan there is we had groups that were comprised of only one gender. So you'd have a group that was all males, or you could have a group that's all females. And we'd have, I'll say one session would be all males and all males. So everybody was male in the session. We'd have other sessions that were all females. And some where there would be a group of males and a group of females. But this sort of accentuated the gender issues. We only got a very slight gender effect in the original experiment. It wasn't at all significant. But we find effects doing it this way. So, territoriality, I'm sure you folks are quite familiar with this, probably more familiar than I am. But there's this idea that you act more aggressively when someone's invading your territory. You see this all sorts of places. You see this on the soccer field. You see this on the battlefield. In fact, there's a paper that we cite in our paper that I guess they measured testosterone levels before soccer matches and found effects for the home players, that their testosterone level went up. So there seems to be some physical mechanisms as well. We were also wondering, so if you have a territoriality effect, which might be predicted for males, what about females? There is a fair amount of literature now in economics that looks at gender differences. But there's no predictions that come out of that literature for this situation. So we didn't know what would happen with women. Would they act like men do? You'll see, I mean, in the business world or whatever world, you'll see women being in the same roles as men. You might think that women now behave like men in these situations, in these experimental games, where you might think they behave differently. We don't really know. We didn't really have a hypothesis. One of the things I'm going to be asking folks to do when I'm finished with this first talk is to tell me what you think the hypotheses might be from something like evolutionary psychology or whatever discipline you happen to have, if you would have had a prediction. I guess I should make you write them down now, but no, I'll let you do it ex post and show that you were anticipating everything. Any questions so far? Nope. I really do tend to have a lot of interaction. Sometimes I don't get off the first slide for about 15 minutes. You guys are very well behaved. This is our game. It's a prisoner's dilemma. So if your payoffs are money, and this was money, you always will do better on an individual level if you choose B than if you choose A. Does anybody need me to show you why that's the case? Nobody's going to embarrass themselves. Okay. You can see that the first number is the payoff for the row player, the second number is the payoff for the column player. So you have these incentives. The socially optimal outcome would be for both people to choose A, but the individually quote-unquote rational outcome is for our choice is to choose B, which leads to a bad social outcome. This is a very well-known game. So what did we do? So we invite people into the laboratory, and we randomly sort them into two different groups. If it happened to be a mixed gender session, then the sorting isn't really random, then there's the males and the females. If it's all males, then what we do is we pass out a bag with numbers in it. You draw numbers. You draw a number for when you're going to make a decision in your home room and when you're going to make a decision in the other room. Okay, so we divide people into two rooms. One room is the room R. R stands for row, for the row players. The other room is the C room, it stands for column. We write this up on the board. We read the instructions, go through examples, take questions. My style is to try to get comprehension. The old style in experimental economics, very old style, was to do things in a completely abstract manner and to really not take questions, not to allow anything to pollute the environment. And I don't find that to be useful. I like the questions. I like to have people understand what they're doing rather than not understanding and giving me pure noise. So I run the risk. One of the issues that's come up, and Ernst Farrow is one of the people that really was the pilot of this, is to ask people questions so that you can see if they understand. So you have questions, what happens if, and then you have them work through this. I find that to be very useful. Some interesting things on another paper that has to do with the winner's curse. We did the standard thing, and then I presented the paper and somebody said, oh, I think people actually like this choice. And I said, I don't think so. So what we did was we gave them more examples. We found that giving people more examples can actually change their behavior. So it's a little bit dangerous, but I like to have at least some kind of comprehension. Same thing here. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, there's a chance I can help you. Please ask. Okay, so they make they add the questions, and then there's this matching system. As I mentioned, and you'll see it on the next slide, I have something from a co-author, previous co-author that I'm stealing. Something that's very important is that the people that are in the audience, if you're not an active player, so in principle there's 10 people in each group. We don't always get 10 people in each group because not always do you have 20 people showing up. So anywhere from 7 to 10 people in a group. You're going to play once at home and once on the road. And when you're playing, you get the full payoff. When you're not playing, you still get 1/3 of the actual outcome of the individual game that was played, both in the room where you are and the other room. Okay, and you're going to observe the ones in your room. So you're like fans in the stands. You're an interested bystander. You're rooting for your team, but you're not an active player at that point. We did other things in the previous paper where we had people that were only audience members, they never got to play, and people that would come and play and they didn't have to sit with the audience. There were some issues there that we didn't have to look at. But we didn't do that here. Okay, so this is how it will look in room R. You've got an experimenter, that's probably me. You've got index cards that have A or B written on them, okay? Then you have seats set up. This is for the visitor, these are for the home people. So the R people are sitting there. You see another R person over there, he or she's going to be going to the other room. I could never do this. I don't have any idea how to do this. I could never do this. And there's the person coming from room C, sitting on the other side of the table and facing this situation, okay? okay? They're turned over. The cards are turned over, you can't see what's on the other side. We even did little ink scribbles on it so you couldn't see through the card. We shuffle them up, and there they are. Now they're gonna make a decision. So they pass their decision card over to me. I show them what happened. Everybody in the room sees what happened. Person leaves, and the other person comes back.
Gary,
Yeah.
question, when you show people in the room what happened, are they able to associate a given behavior with a given individual, or do you just show them the combination?
They're sitting there and they see the person who made the choice. So they're clearly associating it with that person. They're not allowed to talk or to make comments, but you can't help, sometimes they'll make an expression that you can't really control that. You try, but people know that they're being observed, because here's the person, the active our person sitting here. You've got all these other people sitting behind him or her. So you know you're being observed. I could get into other talks and other things, but it does affect your behavior if you have an audience or you don't have an audience. We've got really big differences depending on whether you have an audience or not in this game, and also it's not a game called Battle of the Sexes. So this was one period. This is also played in room C at the same time. You go through this, if you have 8 people in each group, then you go through it 8 periods. If you have 10 people in each group, you do 10 periods, etc. And then at the very end, you total everything up and you pay people according to what the earnings were, and you thank them and you move on. Okay, so this is what a session looks like. Everybody clear on how this works so far? Playing a prisoner's dilemma a certain number of times. You get to play twice, once at home and once in the other room. Groups are either all male or all female. And I mentioned before, they're all male sessions or mixed sessions. There are 5 all male sessions, 5 all female sessions, and 5 mixed sessions. Altogether, 234 participants. Earnings about $16 for about an hour. I try to pay people between $12 and $15 an hour. It keeps them happy, but not so happy. I want to make them feel happy. Results. So I'll point out a couple things. So males in homogeneous sessions, they cooperate almost 45% of the time when they're away, but 27.6% of the time when they're at home. So males are prone to cooperate a lot more when they're away. Question?
Homogeneous means there's males in both rooms?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Homogeneous means that it's an all-male session. Or down here, it means it's an all-female session. Please don't be shy about asking questions. I wouldn't be if I was sitting there. I really do encourage people. Okay, so males seem to cooperate a lot more at home than they do when they're away. This is a strong effect in the all-male sessions. It's moderated, considerably moderated in the mixed sessions. Overall, you get a difference of 13.2 percentage points in that direction. If you look at the combined cooperation rate, the overall cooperation rate, 35.5% for males, 39.2% for females, it's not significantly different. So the idea that women are just more cooperative doesn't seem to play out, but we do get a difference in behavior. So you've seen that males seem to cooperate more when they're away, and when they're at home in front of their own audience, they tend to be more aggressive. So you could think of playing decision B, which is the dominant strategy in own payoffs. That's the more aggressive play. You can think of it that way. That's what we think of it as. What happens with women? Well, we're not aware of any predictions on this topic. So in hunter-gatherer times, I don't know what would happen when there'd be a group of women and another woman from another society. I don't know what would happen. I don't know what the predictions are. That's a question that we have for you is, what predictions are there for this? In any event, what do we get? We get the opposite effect. So women are more cooperative in front of their own audience than they are on the road. And that's true whether they're facing males, so there's a 10.5% difference here, or facing females. There's a 14.6 percentage point difference, slightly less here. If you look at the overall, you again have, you have a 13.3 percentage point difference between home and away, almost exactly the same as the difference for males, but in the other direction. In the other direction. And we didn't particularly predict this. We just sort of stumbled into it. We ran a couple of sessions, we got a strong result, and we ran some more sessions. I mentioned that the overall cooperation rates are pretty similar, but there is this balancing of the interaction of the roles and gender. Question?
I don't know if this is a clarification question.
It's all right.
You said aggression. Could it also be like a risk preference there, where you're sort of more risk prone versus less risk prone?
It could be.
Or is that the same thing?
It could be.
Okay.
Functionally, it's the same thing.
Right.
It could be there's a different origin to it. I mean, that is itself an interesting question. Could it be risk preferences differ? I don't think there's been any research on this, as far as I know. I don't think there's anything on this, but it could easily be that your risk preference changes.
At home in a way.
Yeah, it could easily be. So when you're out with a group of guys or something, and you're much younger than I am, and you're out in the wilderness, somebody does something crazy, and so you'll do it too. Maybe you don't do that when you're away from home.
By playing
I don't know.
by playing cooperate, there's a bigger spread, right? Based on what the other person does.
Yeah, yeah. So if you both cooperate, you each get 5. If neither one cooperates, you both get 2. If you don't and the other person does, you get 7, they get 1. And we play with those parameters. Economics, neoclassical stuff assumes that it doesn't matter what the differences are. But we did that, instead of having 5-5 for the cooperation payoffs, we had that as 6-6 and 4-4. And we got radically different levels of cooperation. With the 6-6, we got about 70% cooperation. 5-5 was about 45%, and in a different setting. And 4-4 we tried as well. We got 15 to 20% cooperation there. So it was very sensitive to the actual ratio, which again is not part of neoclassical economics, but is, I mean, it's completely sensible, what you really should expect. So these are our overall results. So if you put it into percentage terms, the overall cooperation for males is 30% higher when they are away, 40% lower for females when they're away. These are significant differences. I use the test of the difference in proportions. They're both significant. And these are two-tailed tests, so you do get significance for that. I pointed this out already, 13.2 percentage points higher when they're away. This is another test, again significant. Reverse for females in all female sections, and this is borderline statistical significance. We get the same directions in the mixed gender sessions, but they're more muted. They're not significant. For males, I mentioned that it went from 17 percentage points difference to 5. The 5 percentage point thing is not significant at all. Females went from 14.3, I think, to 10.5. Also not significant. Question?
Mixed gender means each group is mixed, not mixed.
No, that's an important point. Thank you for the question. Mixed gender means that one group is all females and one group is all males. What we did in our original experiments was a real mixed gender, so groups could be comprised of any. And we had some slight gender effects in that, but not significant. So it seems when you don't have an when your group isn't all of the same gender, these things kind of go away. But when you take it to this extreme, some tendencies that I guess are deeply seated seem to come out. No theory behind it. I think there's a theory for the males.
Well, one of the issues with this study is that you're confounding territory and coalitions. So not only are you in your
Coalition
territory,
size as well.
you also have your whole group with you.
Absolutely. But wouldn't that be natural that you'd have more people around from your group in your own territory? It seems like that's natural.
You might, but you also can't make strong claims about territory if it's so confounded with coalitions. Because
Well, that's
Elsa,
true.
do you know the work of Elsa Ermer, one of the
I do, I actually know also.
So she finds these same effects with coalitions in a neutral territory, which would suggest that some of these results may be due entirely to the coalition and not the territory.
Actually, I think her work came from the original experiments. That's what happened. I gave advice.
Yeah.
She didn't answer. She didn't answer about this. I wrote, sent her the paper about Lita and other people, and we only got comments from Andy Dalton. So, I guess she's at New Mexico.
Yeah, but so, for her
So
son.
you could think of it as coalition or coalition size. We're pitching it as territoriality. That may be the wrong way to go.
I think you could just make a lot stronger claims about territory if you didn't have the other people in the room. And it was their room.
So, in a certain sense, I think it's actually not territory, and I'll tell you why. Because not in this experiment, but in the first experiment, we also had situations where you had room R written on the board, but there was no audience. So the audience was sequestered in another room. But it's still your territory. It says on the blackboard, room R. Didn't affect anything. So there wasn't a difference just from a pure room effect. It's still arguable whether that's because the audience is there or if that somehow reinforces a sense of territory. I don't know. Comment?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right time to talk about this, but the behavioral ecology underlying this territorial effect, I think is a bit, not an obvious prediction because I'm not totally clear that territoriality plays a role in human evolution that you're assuming it does. I don't think that it's that clear that that's the kind of baseline for which humans
So let me
are
just,
operating.
so the danger in asking me questions, I'll turn around and ask you one back.
Yeah.
So what predictions would you have made and on what basis for these interactions?
Well, what I was thinking was that I don't think you would necessarily assume that, and I think I'm sort of responding to the question about what's happening there's a territoriality or a coalitional
Right.
psychology that you're evoking in this experiment. It seems to me that I think that the female results make a lot of sense and the male results make less sense, is what I would have said,
Really? Based on what?
based on the importance of coalitions.
So can you
And,
give me a reference or send me a reference for that?
Yeah.
Elsa's paper, I guess.
You want to flesh that out, Jim?
Well, I guess the argument would be that, I think there's, for various primates, we have a lot of evidence that social strategies and cooperation play a big role in how females live their lives and have reproductive outcomes. So females that are more socially bonded, say, have high reproductive success. And so the coalitional or the capacity to take advantage of cooperative opportunities for females is really important.
Why isn't it for men?
Well,
I actually agree with you. I tried to push this line
because it's
myself.
not clear if we're talking about chimps, in which case you make a similar argument for male chimps. But in general, males don't cooperate. Well, this is why humans are so interesting.
Yeah,
Because cooperation among males
There's
is
a
more
little bit of
important.
tail chasing here.
So I would, well, I
They
think
aren't
I would have
because they are.
predicted, if I'd had to predict, I would have predicted maybe the opposite. That the females would, the home
How
court
interesting.
advantage would play a stronger role.
Is there anybody here who would have predicted these results? No, well, if that's the case, it's actually interesting.
Oh, that's real
Yeah,
interesting. It's
because
real interesting.
we don't have a prediction, yeah, Dan.
It seems like a lot depends on what you think the choice means, whether you think that it is exclusively pursuit of resources or it's a signal about attributes of the individual. So if I'm interpreting your comment correctly, Joan, you would say it's not surprising that females cooperate more when they're with their coalition, even though that results in potentially a lower payoff for the coalition, because by choosing a cooperative choice, they're advertising
I
some
think
cooperative
it's
attributes.
signaling that's what's going on here, is my feel for it from being in the lab. It feels like, and I don't know where this comes from, it feels like the ethic in an all-male group is to be really aggressive, and the ethic in the all-female group is to try to look for something cooperative to do. I don't know where that comes from.
Well, that's
That's
what, I mean,
the
I'd say where it
feeling I
comes
get.
from is the role of coalitions in
Okay, so that's a possible way to look.
life strategies. Is
Role
an
of
argument
coalition,
you could
role
make
of coalition, so.
for males and females, although it's a little hard to
She found no effect of coalitions. She didn't use a prisoner dilemma, she used a coordination game.
Battle of the sexes probably.
Yeah. So she found no effect of coalition on females' strategies, but a strong effect where men were more aggressive.
So
That's when they had their coalition.
So it seems like there is no one that's really predicting this result, basically. So, I mean, that's okay with me. I don't have a theory myself, I just have the data. We did a regression. I don't know what you think about regressions. I'm not that fond of regressions, but if you're in economics, you have to, at least give lip service to these things. So these are marginal effects, so it's basically what you already saw. There's a marginal effect. The base case is female cooperation rate at home. Females went away, cooperate 12.6%. Percentage points less when they're away. Males at home cooperate a lot more than females do at home. Males away, the rate isn't anything significantly different than females at home, okay? That's all the regression really says. N is 468, that's 234 times 2, because everybody made a choice twice. I think that we control for that as well. Session level data. Why do we bother with session level data? So there is the Selten School of Econometrics. Reinhard Selten, Nobel Prize winner in Germany, he doesn't like econometrics. So his point is that you have a session, you have a lot of interaction in the session. Really, you only have one observation that's independent from the session. Otherwise, you have all these interactions that are going on, it's not pure. Well, I agree with that. So what I do in my paper is that usually what you do with the state-of-the-art in economics now is you'll do non-parametric tests and regressions, and you do them for the most kosher case, which is this, and then you'll relax them and have other tests as well. That's just what we do. So these are all the individual sessions. You can look and you can see, for example, the males. So in every one of these cases, each one of these sessions, the cooperation rate for males was higher when away than at home. I think it's more mixed here. For females, I think it's 4 out of 5 here. This one's reversed. And you get certain tendencies, and then you can do like a binomial or a sign test. You say, well, if all 10 of them went the same direction, that's only going to happen once in 1,024 times. So you have significance at the 0.1% significance level. So that's the kind of test that we can do. You can do other tests where you look at the actual size of the differences, but the simplest one is just the sign test. So we do that, okay? We have 5, for each gender you have five sessions of same gender and 5 with mixed gender. We do a test, this is the sign test. For males it's 2.06, the Z statistic, that's significant at the 4% level, even on a one-tailed test. It's not so significant for women. If you want to call this a one-tailed test, which would mean you had a hypothesis about this, which we don't, then you could argue it's significant at the 9% level. So it's not as significant. And the difference between home and away cooperations varies for each session, compare them across gender. Now we've got 10 sessions for each. Now we can do a Wilcoxon-Rankin test. We get very high significance. So clearly males and females, the difference between home and away behavior is very different. Women cooperate more in front of their audience, and men cooperate less in front of their audience. That seems to be the real message from this. It's stronger in all male groups or all female groups. It's weaker when you have a mixed gender session. And again, I'm interested in theory about that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one thing about these things is it depends how you interpret the results. Depends in a lot of ways on how the people playing the game interpreted it. And, I mean, so it seems to me like, I mean, the way you're framing it is that the males were more aggressive when they were at home, but you're basically sitting at a table with a bunch of your friends behind you being
And you're gonna have
aggressive
to
to
go
a stranger.
And you're going to have to go back and sit with those guys later. Too.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the away condition, right, you're by yourself
Right.
playing a bunch of strange
Against
guys, a team, right?
Yeah.
You know, which suggests that it might be, I mean, psychologically that feels more like you're capitulating and being nice because you're being threatened by another coalition.
So you don't have a blackboard here, you know, I was gonna write up the, well, I'll just pretend that I'm writing it up on the blackboard. So consider the Battle of the Sexes game, where you've got 3-1 and 1-3 on the diagonal, and zeros off the diagonal. So if you're the role player, if you both choose A, you're gonna get 3, and the other person's gonna get 1. If you both choose B, you're gonna get 1, and the other person's gonna get 3. So our strongest result was in that game, the Battle of the Sexes, not with mixed gender, whatever. But what happens? So you're at home in front of your own audience. Are you gonna choose, suppose you're in room R, you're an R player. Your favorite outcome is AA. Are you gonna choose A or are you gonna choose B? You're gonna choose A. Not only that, but the person who's the visitor kind of realizes that, and they're gonna tend to choose B to accommodate. And when you go on the road, you're gonna tend to choose B because you figure the other person's gonna choose B. Because what you've got is this pressure from the people behind you. Choose A, choose A, choose A. We want the big payoff, and you know it. And you also know that if you choose B, even if it works out, you're not gonna get a lot of respect from your group. So I see it as aggression. It's not the same thing, but we got that 53 out of 56 times people in their own home room would choose, well, call it room R, would choose A. So it's like 95% of the time it would happen. It's very strong. I don't know if you want to call it aggression or what you're going to call it, but that's the original idea here. So it seems like there's an issue of what we're going to call it and how we interpret the results. It might be safer not interpreting it at all, actually, but then how do you sell it? I've actually gone through all this stuff. I don't know what the predictions are. I would have predicted a difference for males, although you predicted the opposite. I would have predicted that much. I would have predicted that it's smaller in mixed gender groups, but I wouldn't have had any predictions about women. I would have actually predicted the same direction, but weaker. And it's wrong.
I think my prediction also might be a bit of confusion kind of snuck in here on my part about the fact that they're playing against an outsider. And that would change my thinking. I want to Justice.
Okay. Well, in any event, the predictions aren't trivial. Yeah.
Well, I think again, Joan's point about having to think about behavioral ecology is important. So you think about when are men alone in a group of other men and a coalition of other men, and when are women alone in a group of other women, and in human history it seems like most likely women would be marrying into a foreign group. So what do you have to press your status. You have to, you have to.
Yeah, the dynamics are very different in the mixed gender, because you could be
Right.
American.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the same, the
same gender?
Yeah, the
Okay.
homogenous groups.
Okay.
So, I mean, this in some ways makes sense that men in a group of other men might be more conciliatory because that's a very dangerous position, whereas women in a group of other women have to set up, you have to start setting up where, you know, the idea of being in that, of pushing your status in that group.
But why are women more willing to be aggressive, if you want to call it that, when they're on the road?
Well, I mean,
They're
there's
not
a couple of ways
threatened
you can
as
think
much,
about
I
that. So, I
guess.
mean, Karthik pointed out that it's risk-taking. In some ways, the being aggressive is actually the safer. If you're looking at just resources, you're sure to get a better deal, right?
So
Since-
one result that's very robust, at least I have a paper on it, and we found all over the place. In financial decisions in the laboratory, women are much more risk averse than men. This happens over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
But we're not really finding that here.
I
We're
know.
finding the rates are about, in fact, if you want to call it risky, women are 39.2 versus 35.4. They're more likely to take the risky choice, which is cooperation.
Mhm.
So that seems to go in the opposite direction.
But
Well,
that's
it doesn't
driven
go
by
in-
them in their own group, right? The cooperative, with their own coalition.
Yeah, it's,
But they're cooperating with an outgroup member back.
Right, no,
I
I know,
know.
that part's still
Yeah.
confusing. I'm
Yeah.
not really sure where that one comes in.
it just seems that there's a different ethic among, at least
Yeah.
among women and men undergraduate students at UCSB. I don't know how far this generalizes, and I doubt that they're different than other people in California. Would I expand this outside of California? I don't see why not. If anything, I would have expected in California, women are more used to, I don't know, male roles maybe. I won't take that statement very far, but you would think that, you know, the women's movement has certainly been around in California for as long as anywhere else. You would expect that if there's a gender role changing happening, it would have happened here already. And if you don't get it here, You wouldn't think you'd get it elsewhere. We haven't tried it elsewhere, so I just don't know. But we're surprised by the results. We don't know how to sell them. Clark.
And one thing about the sort of way the subjects are framing the game thing is, I mean, we're kind of talking about it as if, I mean, we're comparing the conditions, which is what you obviously really have to do an experimental comparison. But I mean, if you think of it in terms of if there's some sort of baseline level of cooperativeness and which way the conditions push that
That's how I would see it.
around,
actually, yeah.
you know, there's a sense in which, I mean, you mentioned signaling or just the general more idea that there's impression management going on, right? That, you know, one interpretation, I'm not saying I know the reason for this, but that being nice to an outgroup member in front of your coalition, you know,
Different
maybe,
things for men and women.
yeah.
Seems like.
Right,
That's,
so
that's. yeah.
that the interesting condition might not be, you know, that women are aggressive towards outgroup members in front of a bunch of strangers. That may just reflect that's not that socially meaningful of a situation, but that, you know, the behavior, the generosity is really prompted more.
So it sounds
you know,
like
by
what this
the-
really needs is more treatments to
Maybe,
disentangle some of this.
yeah.
So maybe we'll get you as a
I mean,
referee
it's
and you can
very
suggest
close
that.
talk, but I'm just, you know.
All right, so this is, I'll get on with this. This is just recapitulation of what I presented you.
Real quick,
Go ahead.
you may not need more conditions so much as just, you know, figuring out what people are thinking after the game happens once they get back to their group, right?
How will we know that though?
Ask.
Too late for the second.
Right, no, I mean,
But this is
as
the
opposed to
disciplinary.
running, as opposed to making your experiments more complicated down the
Yeah,
road. running.
This is a disciplinary difference, right? So economists don't
It's
believe what
changing.
people say.
No, that's changing. That's changing. So I've tried this before, you know, why don't you ask people, and I, you know, try it, and get a bunch of garbage. But I have a recent experiment with a couple of really smart Israeli theorists, and one of them, who's like a god, says, why don't you ask people, blah, 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 how they came to their decision. And I grumbled, but all right, you know, I didn't say you're a big shot, so I'll do it. Basically, that's what I did. And we got actually really interesting data. So I'm not so averse to doing that now. I think that there's meaning to it. Yes, the prevailing tendency in economics is unless people are getting paid for accuracy, don't pay any attention to it. But I found some things. For example, I have something, well, it's another topic, but we did an add-on to an experiment, and one of the conditions was you can fill out a questionnaire. And we found, I don't actually have the control on this, but usually you just give people a questionnaire and they fill out some answers while you're figuring out the payouts and while you're paying them. But this time I said, I'm going to pay you $2 for filling out the questionnaire. I believe we got much more thinking about what to put down. The answers were more meaningful because we paid them $2. I don't have a basis for that. I do believe that's what happened though. So I used to play poker kind of for a living, and I'm very intuitive, and I kind of read a lot of what's happening in the room. That was my sense. I could be wrong. I'm wrong a lot. But I have a lot of opinions, yeah.
Have you noticed any tendency when someone goes away first and then plays in his group, is that person more or less aggressive? I mean, once that person has the experience of being in outside, once it
We can look at that. I don't know that we've looked at that exactly. We can look at that.
it wouldn't change at all, it wouldn't explain anything.
We can look at that. We don't get dramatic differences over time. The cooperation rate for males does seem to be dropping over time somewhat. For females, we don't get a big difference. Because this is the issue that maybe what's going on is people have observed what's happening, which relates to your point, and they're affected by it. So I'll just give you one more slide on that. Look at the correlation between choice in one period and choice in the next, which is close to what you're asking, but not quite the same thing. So you only observe choices in your own room and the one time that you go to the other room. So mainly you observe your own choices. I changed terminology. Host means when you're at home, and guest means when you're away. We get very high correlation, 0.475, between cooperation from one period to the next, so it looks like people are paying a lot of attention. But we also get gets cooperation from one period to the next is even actually slightly higher. The correlation coefficient is 0.495, which is also very highly significant. So choices at home are no less independent than choices when away. So there may be correlation, but it doesn't seem like it's driven by observation. Perhaps we have to look at it more carefully. My last slide. So I mentioned this other paper, and I should mention Luca Ragati was the guy that did that fancy stuff with people with the animation. I give him credit for that. We found no significant differences across gender in that environment. I mentioned that already. But the picture seems to change quite a bit in what we've done. As far as we know, and this of course could be correct, evolutionary psychology seems to offer an explanation for when all players are male, but no clear prediction in the mixed gender or the all-female sessions. Lita didn't have a clear prediction herself. I talked to her on the phone. She said it depends. She thought that the male effect was predicted. That was her sense. I don't know. So that's that talk. Shall I move on to the other one, or comments?
Questions on this then?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a useful follow-up or not, but a game, what if you ran the public goods game, where you have an actual game with coalitions or territoriality, you have like 3 home people and 1 away, and then you sort of shuffle them through, so one person is always playing with a bunch of the home team, and how would they sort of over-contribute or under-contribute? Because there's no sanctioning for them, but they're sort of visiting the group.
I mean, I would guess that you're just going to have the visitors being more free riders in that situation, regardless. That would be my guess. That's going to. I think that would swamp everything. I haven't run it.
Because that would,
bet
then
that
you
would
could
swamp
test that
it.
against the male data here, where the males are more cooperative with the prisoners and limit away, and then you predict they'd be less cooperative in the public goods when they're away.
Could try that. I'll write that down. The thing is, I get bored of these things, so I tend to do things that are like brand new, and then I don't want to do all the follow-ups. I want to do something else brand new, and I kind of get away with it, but it's not really a good research strategy. But I just don't have a long enough attention span. What was I talking about? You know that joke? There are 2 things that happen to you when you get older. The first is that you lose your memory, and I can't remember the second. There's one about economists too. There are 3 kinds of economists: those who can count and those who can't. All right. I got it. I got it. I don't want to touch those lips. I can get a problem for harassers. Why isn't this sticking? What? All right, I give up. So this is a paper that, again, this is taking things not quite in the same laboratory setting. So that other one was in a laboratory, but with face-to-face. And you usually don't see that in economics because that creates all sorts of things. But without the face-to-face, without the audience there, I don't think we would have gotten anything. So that's already somewhat, thank you. It's already, it's complaining again.
Oh, good Lord.
So far, so good.
Fingers crossed.
So this project actually kind of brought to me. These 2 other gentlemen are they were students at UCSB, and they had this idea, and I kind of expanded it and ran with it. And we ended up doing 3 studies. And the basic idea was to look at procrastination. And along the way, we found out about some willpower papers, and so we kind of did that too. I'm not going to go through the theory and the economic stuff. There's a bunch of different theory. And usually I talk about that, but I think I'm not going to bother here. But let me show you what we did. Okay, so self-control problems, this is well known. There's various sorts. You can have addictions like overeating or cigarette smoking. could also have something where you have an activity that has future benefits, but you don't want to do it now. That could be, for example, studying, or it could be exercising. It could be a variety of different things. So one of them you want to stop an activity, one of them you want to start an activity, okay? Procrastination, there's an old study, 95% of college students procrastinate. I don't know what you think about that. I'm interested in procrastination, but the funny thing for me is that I don't procrastinate at all. I don't procrastinate at all. I like to do things right away, so I don't have to think about them. So this gives me what we like to call a comparative advantage over other researchers. So there are a lot of people interested in procrastination, but most of them have severe procrastination problems, and they haven't gotten around to doing the study. My advantage. I don't procrastinate at all. Talk to my co-author. Problem with co-authoring with me is you get the paper back in 2 days. It's your turn again. The original idea was we wanted to see if we would get procrastination. We would give people, I don't know, how many people here are familiar with a study by Ariely and Wertenbach? Nobody. Okay, different group. Okay, so they did something where they had a class, Ariely's class at MIT, and there were term papers that had to be done, and they would let people like set up deadlines and so on, structure, and the structure seemed to help. So we thought that we would try and give people structure in a task that takes place over time, and that would help them. That was our first study. Okay, so we looked at studying and how people deal with the procrastination and how people achieve a studying task. We also got into willpower, depletion, and replenishment because we found some interesting patterns that look obvious ex post, but we hadn't anticipated. This is for economists. Basically, there's a handbook of experimental economics, came out in '95. They're working on another version now. And Al Roth talks about reasons to do experiments. One of them is searching for facts. It's kind of what we're doing. You just don't know what the lay of the land is, and you do experiments to just get data. Another is whispering in the ears of princes, so that's policy applications. You do experiments to try and say what would be a good policy. Then speaking to theorists, so that you get data, you show that the existing theory is not quite right, and the theorists can hopefully improve the theory. So this would seem to fit into all of these categories. Literature review. So there are some studies now of habits of procrastination. More for habits, there is increasing literature in economics on procrastination as well. Angus and Levy, they did something in Israel with graduation. They gave people incentives. If you graduated under certain conditions, you get some money. It was partially effective. In one case, it was effective when it was programmed with school-wide, but not when only it was individuals. This is the paper I mentioned, Ariely and Wertenbach. They had 3 tasks over a 3-week period, and externally imposed costly deadlines were more effective than self-imposed costly deadlines, but those in turn were more effective than having no additional deadlines. So our first task, I'll just take it out of order, I guess, but the first task that we had was we worked something out with the library. We got a room at the library where students could go and they could log in and they could log study hours. And it was some partially monitored environment. So not completely controlled, but reasonably well controlled. The library was open all the time, pretty much. And we said, if you complete 75 hours of studying over a 5-week period, we'll pay you $95. And if you don't, we won't pay you $95. So that was the task. There are a lot of selection issues here, but that was our task. And we thought, so what did we do? We had one condition where, one treatment where there are no other requirements. 75 hours, doesn't matter what days you do it. If you do it by the end, you get your money. The other, we thought it would help people. We said you have to log at least 12 hours cumulative per week. So at the end of 1 week, you had to have had 12 hours. At the end of 2 weeks, you had to have at least 24 hours. 3 weeks, 36 hours. We thought that by giving them the structure, that would keep them from falling too far behind, and it would help them in their task. Seems to go along with the Ariely and Wertenbach approach. Okay. More stuff. So, you guys know Dick Thaler? So, he's quite a character. I'm not actually a big fan of him, but he's done a lot of really interesting stuff. this is something out of myopic loss aversion, and savings and so on. So people don't like to save money now, but if you allow people to commit not only your current income, but your future income, then savings rate quadrupled. Very effective program. He also has a mutual fund where I think the difference is that you only give reports every 6 months instead of every month. And so you don't experience losses as frequently. So you're more willing to stay with stocks that are riskier because you don't see the losses. If you get statements every month, you'll see losses. If losses are felt more than gains, it's going to bother you. So if you just don't look at it very often, it's easier to take. Although 6 months of the current stock market, never mind. Another study, they did some scholarships to undergraduates at Canadian University with some success. And something else that's not up here, but this is this guy Roland Fryer, who's at Harvard. As I understand it, he has a $42 million grant for doing stuff in public schools in Washington, D.C., where I think they're paying students $100 per week for getting good grades and behaving nicely.
New York City?
Washington is what I heard. Because I heard that from my co-author Nick, who's in D.C. at Rand. So I know that he had tried something in New York City. I think it didn't work, is what happened. Because suddenly, they're asking about it, and suddenly no one's talking. So I think it didn't work. But there's this thing going on now which, might work. That's a slightly different thing. We're not paying people to do that. We're looking at how people do with their tasks. So study 1, I've already told you what it was. Study 2 is another study where we looked at our results and we tried to change some things. So we found strong day of the week effects in study 1, and so we wanted to get at that a little bit. And so to eliminate them, we tried to have 7 different groups that started on different days of the week, and you had to do a task over 7 consecutive days, so it would even out the day of the week kind of effect. You could pick the order, so the tasks there were 2 questions, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, or 14 questions would be a task, and they were multiple choice questions from econ tests, basically, from their courses. These are generally students that were in these courses. So you could order however you wanted to, and if you completed it, actually we had I'll get to that. I'll cover that in a moment. Okay, and study 3. We took that, again, from our results in study 2 and from discussions with some people at University of Michigan who were doing something with willpower. So we wanted to look at willpower, so we did something with 20 questions online over 2 straight days. We looked at a group that starts as a Tuesday, Wednesday group and a Friday, Saturday group. We also varied whether they were exposed to a hard or an easy Stroop test on the first day. If you don't know what that is, we're going to cover it. Economists have no idea what it is. I've never heard of it. Okay, study 1. We invited people to an introductory meeting. We didn't say what it was about. What we said was it involves a non-trivial amount of money to be earned over a period of time. We wanted to tell people this isn't just a lab experiment coming for an hour and it's over. At least tell them what to expect in some sense. So people came to the meetings. There were 2 separate meetings. One meeting was for the group that was going to be the control group. I guess one group is the one that doesn't have other restrictions, and the other group is the one that does have the weekly restrictions. We got 73 or 74, depends what you count. One person signed up but never did anything, so we don't know how to count that person. Out of 87 people, so we actually got 85% of the people that came to the meetings actually participated. There's a worry about selection effects here. So you advertise for people, you're getting a group of people that have selected to come to the experiment. There are probably other people that procrastinated, they meant to sign up but they didn't get around to it. Then there's another group that meant to send in their college applications but didn't get around to it. You're always going to have selection problems. There's no way around it. But we're going to claim that we didn't have a big selection problem, at least from the people that were invited to the meetings, because 85% of them actually participated. Partially monitored library rooms is very nice. The library actually cooperated very nicely with us and helped us out. They're assigned a web page. They could check on a number of hours logged. At the end, you get your earnings, and they fill out a little questionnaire. We talk to them. So this, again, we talk to people at the end of the experiments. We actually listen to what they say because sometimes it's really revealing. things are changing in economics. I published papers that had nothing to do with paying for correct decisions. I have a paper on happiness. We ask people how happy they are. You can't pay them in an incentive-compatible manner because we don't know what the right answer is. You can actually publish these things. Like I say, it's hard to say why I'm considered an economist. That's what it is. Study 1 results. So here's the group that had no weekly restrictions, and here's the group that had weekly restrictions. Does it look like the weekly restrictions helped? No. It looks like they hurt. So neoclassical economics would say, well, of course, if you give them more hurdles to overcome, it's going to be more difficult. You're not going to do it. So that's what standard theory would say. There's a few other theories I could get into. There's a self-reputation model. There's the quasi-hyperbolic model, which says you value the present much more than the future, so you're likely to put off unpleasantness until the future, or I'll start my diet tomorrow, that sort of thing. There's a dual self model that kind of is like that, and you've got a series of short-run selves, and you've got a long-run self. This is actually David Levine, who used to be here, David Levine and Drew Frudenberg. And so the long-run self determines how much money that the short-run self is going to be able to take with him to the nightclub, knowing that the nightclub he's going to engage in bad behavior. So the long-run self tries to add up the utilities of all the short-run selves, and the short-run self looks at what's best for me now given my opportunity set. So there are a few models, and they make different predictions. We get 50% higher completion rates without restrictions than with restrictions. It's not quite, it's borderline statistically significant, depends what you count. We can't claim a one-tailed test because our hypothesis went the other way. So it goes. We're wrong, I'm wrong a lot, really a lot. But we try things, So this is what we did at first, okay. We try to do a counterfactual, you can't quite get it, but the completion rates are quite similar in the no requirements treatment. If you had imposed it in the no requirements treatment, what would the completion rate have been? Basically about the same, 38.9 instead of 40.5. It's kind of a delicate argument, probably I shouldn't pursue this at all. But it looks like they behaved about the same in the two environments if you take this out of. So people didn't, how am I going to say this? People behaved about the same way, but because they had additional requirements, some people flunked out along the way, basically. I think that's what this slide is trying to say. Poorly, that's what it's trying to say. We got strong day of the week effects. We were very surprised. And everybody else says, well, it's obvious. But they all say that it's obvious after they've seen the data. Why didn't I have we were blind to this. Why was I blind to it? Because I work 7 days a week. I don't know from day of the week effects. I work every day, that's what I do. So these are study hours logged. This is the beginning of the week. This is the weekend. Beginning of the week, this is the weekend. Beginning of the week, this is a power failure one evening in the library, this little dip here, during peak studying hours, right? But it's a very strong effect. Now you might expect this in the group with weekly restrictions because they're facing a deadline every week. You might expect something like this, but we didn't expect it at all for the group that doesn't have weekly restrictions. So David Levine thinks this is obvious, but I don't think he would have thought it was obvious ex ante. So what does students at UCSB do? Well, you guys know UCSB is a party school, right? But it also has serious students. They compartmentalize their time. During the week, Monday through Thursday, they work hard. Once Thursday hits, Thursday afternoon hits, it's party time until Sunday night. That seems to be what people do. Again, it seems very obvious now. We didn't anticipate this at all. Going from week to week, we don't see a discernible difference. I'll actually go back to the previous slide. These peaks aren't really very different from week to week. If you're looking at procrastination, you might expect, at least for the group without weekly requirements, that they would backload. And you get much higher peaks over here. We didn't really see this. These are regressions that look at whether there's a difference between week 1 and the other weeks. The only thing that's significant at all is week 3. This was the week that had the power failure. Other than that, no real difference. And if you look at the day-to-day thing, and I don't have a slide for this, I should. The highest logged hours were Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday was slightly lower. Thursday was already dropping off a fair amount. Friday and Saturday were the lowest. Saturday was the very lowest. And Sunday started coming back, and it seems like that was in the evening. Question?
Do the weekly requirements, their deadline was Sunday night, or?
Sunday night, yeah.
Instead of the last minute meeting the requirements
Yeah.
was on Sundays?
And we gave both groups a little thing near the end of the first week because we wanted to make sure people will remember that there was this thing. So it's not completely kosher to do that. It's just one of those decisions I made, and it's worth doing it so we don't have people dropping out inadvertently. And then there was one person that she complained about the power failure, and we gave her a chance to make up some time. Again, it seemed like the right thing to do, I don't know. Question?
How did your weekly, weeks 1 to 5 correspond to the academic schedule? Did they have midterms and finals that you're using?
This was, I think this was between midterms and finals, I think. I don't actually remember. It's a good question. I don't remember. Yeah, question.
Is there something where if I show up and somebody else is already there, I can't?
No, there was a big room. So there was no, no congestion problem.
So if someone doesn't make the minimum 12
Cut
hours
off.
of study, are they dropped from the?
With the exception of this one woman who complained. And she was fairly close, and she did make it up the next week. Yeah, so they were dropped. Those were the rules. You're supposed to play by the rules. Oh, we did stuff. So this was between the midterm and the final. So in midterms, the people that succeeded. By the way, this was a very interesting exercise in calibration. So this is kind of an expensive experiment, especially if everybody completes it. And I have my own research budget. It's not huge. And I wanted to get about a 50% rate. So we did a little pilot for a 2-week pilot with the group, and we kind of eyeballed it and estimated that this would work about 50%. We actually got 50% success rate overall. I'm very pleased about that. Because I had a certain amount of money I was willing to spend, but you know, when you're doing this field stuff, I mean, I don't know what you guys do, but you just don't know what you're going to get. When you do a lab experiment, I know about what it's going to cost me. It's really easy. This is much trickier. We get a slight difference between the winner, the people that succeeded and the people that didn't succeed on the midterm score. So people that were able to complete it in 75 hours, they did this after the midterms, of course, but they were a bit better students, let's say. The grades, we have the grades on the midterms. When we looked at final scores, now we have a significant difference. So we can argue that they actually were studying. Because this is a comment, well, were they really monitored, or were they looking at Facebook, and what were they doing? And apparently they were occasionally looking at Facebook and stuff like that. But they also were logging study hours, and that's what this seems to be suggesting, that we actually had people studying, and that it maybe even helped them. Study 2. So we looked at these data, and we said, what can we do? So we created the second task, which was multiple choice questions, ranging from 2 questions to 14 questions. You can choose whatever order you like to do them. We made them do 7 consecutive days, and the questions related to the course material, and their courses were recruited from the classes, the intermediate, micro, and principles classes. Okay. We thought we'd be creative. This didn't really work very well. I wouldn't do it again. We had 4 iPods for 181 participants. We told them 1 for every 50. You could win an iPod. It would be a lottery. You would get lottery chances depending on certain things. So one thing they had to do when they signed up, they had to give a task order. If they were, planned task order. They don't have to stay to it, but it was a planned task order. If they did that, they got 1 lottery entry. And then if they finished all the questions, they got 2 more lottery entries. And if they got at least 75% correct, they got another 4 lottery entries. So we wanted people not just to answer questions, but to have some reason to try and spend some time thinking about them. So when they signed up, and this was a week before the study, they were randomly assigned a starting day of the week. Oh, there's a stray parenthesis in, and designed a planned task order, but they could do anything they wanted when they actually did it. And after every day's questions, students were told how many were correct. Questions? It was a tough task. It was too hard. And one thing about doing things online is that people, if they have questions they can't actually get their questions answered, you get confusion. We hadn't thought this through, but we still have data. It's kind of interesting data, but we would do this differently now. So only 28 of 181 people actually succeeded at the task. Okay? 60 people never really did anything. 69 people, they completed their thing a week before. 69 people did between 1 and 6. 52 people did all 7 subtasks, but this means that there were 24 people that did all the tasks but they didn't do on consecutive days. I think that represents confusion. The alternative is to think that people thought that these things were so valuable that they did them for their pedagogical value, which is arguable. So I think there was confusion out there. People thought that if they did them eventually it would work. It didn't. A little bit regrettable. That's what you do. One question you might ask in terms of what we did in the first study was having a structure. Does having a structure help? Well, here the structure would be you have a planned task order that you chose yourself. Does it help to stick to that task order? We can't look at people who stuck to it for all 7 days because, of course, all those people by definition finished. But we can at least look at the first day. So 46 people stuck to their first day plan, 14 succeeded. 50 people didn't stick to it, and 14 succeeded. There's no difference there. So having a structure didn't help here either. At least it didn't hurt this time, but it didn't help. This is the planned pattern of what you would do for each day. This is averaging the number of questions. And the main thing to take from this is the people that succeeded and the people that didn't succeed, their plans look pretty similar. And this is average number of questions answered by task day. So you might expect to see some procrastination, put your task, the longer tasks off towards the end. We actually do see that. This is a pretty clear pattern of increasing number of questions over the 7 days. This is only for people that finished the task. Percentage of quits by week. Well, people didn't quit on Monday and Tuesday, but they quit on Saturday a lot. Okay. Completion rates by starting day of the week. This is a little weird. I have a story, but I don't know how much I believe it. The highest rates here, well, actually the highest rate is people that started on Saturday, interestingly. But people started Monday and Tuesday did pretty well. People that started on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday didn't do well. Why would that be? My story is that they were anticipating the weekend is coming up and they're not going to want to do it, so they would drop out in anticipation of the weekend. People started on Saturday, they say the worst is over, I'll just do something easy today and I'll carry through. I'm just making the story up though, I have no actual evidence of it. Number of questions answered per person by day of the week, so we're looking for these day of the week effects. We're thinking we're going to get big differences by day of the week. We don't get these big differences by day of the week. So part of what was going on here was to say, in the first study we made people come into a room. Now people can stay wherever they are and do it online. And so maybe that made some of the difference. It looks like there isn't a strong day of the week effect here. But we do see this over the 7 days, increasing profile and questions answered. We don't see much over the day of the week, although we do see patterns for quits and completion rates by day of the week. That's what I just said. So there could be a willpower story here. What's the willpower story? Well, you have your willpower replenished during the weekend by whatever techniques that you use for replenishing your willpower during the weekend. And then here's Monday and Tuesday, and your willpower is strong. You can go out there and you can work hard. And then over the course of the week, it kind of gets down, 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 down. And the weekend arrives, and it's replenishment time again. So the stories seem pretty consistent with our data. By the way, if you disaggregate the data, you do see some evidence of procrastination in study 1. Some people do backload, some people front load. And there's a story that you can tell if you're Matthew Raven, who is my advisor and is one of the modelers of the quasi-hyperbolic discounting thing. He says, you can't reject that people, you can't say people aren't procrastinating because there's an insurance aspect. If you're uncertain about the future, you might actually want to front load so that if you get into trouble later, you're okay. And he says you don't have a structural model, you're not estimating a structural model if, well, there's a coefficient beta. If it's close to 1, it actually could go the other way. So we don't claim to reject his model. Okay, study 3. So we realized after study 2 the task was too hard. So we wanted to do a simpler task. We also wanted to specifically look at willpower. Yeah.
I don't know whether this is the right place to raise this question, but have you factored in the desirability of your reward as a factor in people not sticking with it? In other words, all those kids have iPods. What's so wonderful about getting a whole new iPod?
This was done, iPods were still, I think we did this about a year and a half ago. Your point's still well taken. This was a design that wouldn't follow again. Because, for one thing, you're not guaranteed any money at all. And in my lab experiments, generally the deal I have with human subject committee is that people are guaranteed $5 for showing up. They always get at least $5. And what we did, I mean, your point's very well taken. We didn't guarantee them anything except for lottery chances. We don't know how people evaluate those. And it's for iPods, which they may already have. So that might have been an issue as to why we had low completion rates. I think the task was also difficult, and there was confusion. So there's a number of reasons to criticize that design. I'll get you in a second. Another reason to criticize that design is, suppose that you haven't been doing well on your questions and you decide that there's no reason, no way you're ever going to make it to 75%. Then you just start answering questions blindly. So the incentives are also wrong. Question?
Wondering if you know how much time people spend on questions.
We do in the third study. We don't in the second study. We actually do have some time in the third study. Okay, so the third study here, mainly people from classes. We didn't quite get enough, so we supplemented from the econ majors in the database. 20 multiple choice questions, similar to the questions in the second study. They're just basically multiple choice questions that you could see on tests. You could do all 20 questions on the first day, or you could do all of them on the second day, or you can spread it between the 2 days, whatever you wanted to do. Okay. The only thing was that, and we had 2 different groups. Well, we had 4 different, it's a 2x2 design. One is the starting date. One element is the starting date is either Tuesday, Wednesday, or for a Friday, Saturday group. The other is what type of Stroop test they were exposed to. There's a hard Stroop and an easy Stroop. It's my next slide. They had to do 250 rounds of this Stroop on the first day. So there's one argument that says you might want to do all your questions on the first day since you actually are there, you have a transaction cost, and you don't want to come back the second day. But then if the questions are kind of too hard, maybe you want to spread them out. It's not clear what direction it should go. But we're also going to look at a willpower issue. So ex ante, your predictions, judging from study 2, you would think that the Tuesday, Wednesday group would do better than the Thursday, and the Friday, Saturday group. And you would expect that people that were exposed to a hard Stroop would have their willpower depleted, and they maybe wouldn't do so well. That would, I think, be the predictions ex ante. I like to slide the best of all my slides. So if you don't know the Stroop test, and I'd never heard of it, you look at these things. And so you look at this green, and you're supposed to put down, what is it? You're supposed to write the actual color that you see, I think. Mm-hmm. This is so hard for me. It's unbelievably difficult for me. I could do about 2 of them, and then you'd have to pay me a large amount of money. Well, less now that I lost all the money on real estate, but you'd still have to pay me a lot of money to get me to keep doing it. It's really hard for me, really hard. What would an easy Stroop be? Hey, green is actually green, yellow is actually yellow. That's easy, I can do that, no problem. 250 of those, no problem. But the other one, for me, it's very difficult, and it would sap my willpower. It's supposed to do that, and psychologists use this as a way to deplete willpower. This is new to economics. Okay, so what were our results? Well, we got reasonable success rates, so this was calibrated better. 100 people out of 158 succeeded, and the Tuesday, Wednesday group did in fact do better than the Friday, Saturday group. 72% versus 54%, significant at the 2% level. And I think we could even claim a one-tailed test to make it significant at the 1% level. 39 people answered all 20 on the first day, 15 answered all 20 on the second day. People that tried on the second day to complete it, almost all of them finished. Okay? Now, part of that might be how hard they worked at it. So we do find that the percent of correct answers on the first day are significantly higher than on the second day. So it could be that on the second day, people were just kind of answering to finish it. Because the quality of the answers was lower. Okay. You get this for all different subgroups. And the percentage of answers is slightly higher for the Tuesday, Wednesday group than for the other, borderline significance. So people did better in the Tuesday, Wednesday group. The Stroop result was kind of funny. So this is the surprising result. The people who were assigned the hard Stroop did better. Not what I expected at all. Just the opposite of what I expected. So 70%, if you were assigned a hard Stroop, 70% of those people actually finished over the 2 days. And only 57% if you're assigned the easy Stroop. This is borderline statistical significance. Again, a one-tailed test would be significant, but my prediction went the other way. You do see something from the Stroop test though. So if you're assigned the easy Stroop, 49% answered all 20 questions on the first day. But if you're assigned the hard Stroop, only 31% were able to complete it on the first day. So it does look like your willpower was depleted on that first day. But after the first day, it's as if you say to yourself, you know, I already did this hard Stroop thing. I already have so much into this now, I want to make sure that I finish. And there is a story that goes along with it. One of the models that I mentioned is the self-reputation model by Fudenberger and Thoreau, no, not Fudenberger, Benabou and Thoreau. And the idea is that you don't know your own willpower, and you get signals from what you've done in the past. So the model here would say that because you completed the hard Stroop the day before, that's a signal that your willpower is strong, and you're going to be able to do it. So there's a story that goes along with this. It's just not what we expected at all. So in all three of these studies, my predictions have basically been wrong a lot of the time. Fortunately, I'm not paid by my predictions. I get to spin them however I want to. Regressions once again. So the Tuesday group, yeah, they did better than the other group. And I'll skip some of this stuff. The hard Stroop, the success rate was marginally higher. And you did significantly fewer questions on the first day and significantly more questions on the second day. Males actually did better in this study 3 than females, although it was the opposite in studies 1 and 2, and I have a speculation I'll give you about that in a moment. Okay. Concluding remarks. Well, at least in economics, this is one of the first studies to provide empirical evidence on this topic, procrastination and willpower. In fact, there's nothing in economics on willpower. There are no data at all until this study on willpower. It's the very first. Procrastination, the problem is you can't really do this stuff in the lab. You have to do it somehow out in the field. That's different territory altogether. It's not easy to do this stuff. I mean, I got results. I critiqued my own studies as to what was wrong with them, but they're not easy to do. Maybe for you guys it's not so bad because you're used to going out in the bush or whatever and doing wild stuff out there. But for people that are used to doing things in the controlled laboratory, this is much wilder. So there's very little of this in economics, which is fine with me. People really interested in this topic haven't gotten involved yet because they can't be bothered to start the work. Okay, we do see evidence of procrastination. We do see willpower depletion, and we have models, and we basically say, hey, all your models have something to say. All of your models bring something to the table. Nice job. You don't want to criticize anybody. Time of the week matters, and maybe in more than just an opportunity cost sense. Our behavioral interventions, like giving a structure or having them give a planned task order, or having the Stroop test, seemed to be going in the wrong direction almost every time. Well, the second time it didn't matter. The other 2 times they went the wrong way. So behavioral interventions often don't go the right way. And we just scratched the surface. Gender differences, I think it's my last slide. In studies 1 and 2, women did significantly better than men. Now these are studies where you have a long period of time, 5 weeks in the first study and 1 week of doing it every single day in the second study. Women did better in those studies. But in study 3, men did better. And this is something more of a quick burst. You can actually do all 20 the first day. You only have to keep track of 2 days. It's not so hard. So the conventional wisdom on campus seems to be, from talking to the students, that women are much better at organizing their time than men as students. And in this case, if you make it a short enough task, men have the willpower, but they just can't be bothered to do things over a long period of time. They don't have the duration, right? So Dan was talking earlier about the difference between, I think this is what we were talking about, or maybe it was somebody else, that women seem to form coalitions, and it's harder for them to get into a group, but then when they form the group, they identify stronger, they stay with the group longer, and men come and go much more quickly. So maybe there's more of an impatience among men than among women that would go along with this. That's all I have to say on that. And I'm done. That's almost one thing.
So we have a couple of minutes for questions.
Clark is first or second?
You can go down.
You can go down.
So rather than the self-reputation explanation for the effects of the hard Stroop task, I don't have principal grounds for this, it's just an intuition, but it seems to me that people are extremely susceptible to the Concord fallacy. And that looks like what's going on here. They say, well, I've already invested all this in doing all this hard
Sunk
work,
cost
so
fallacy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So now I'm gonna keep doing.
That's what I think is going on. Yeah, actually. But it goes along with this model. But I don't really think it's a sub. There's an argument. I don't know if you probably have never seen their paper. It's very technical paper. But they have some insights like this that if you don't know yourself, you get signals from yourself from your past about your own actions. I don't know if you guys do this, but I mean, for me, it's like I don't remember quite how I dealt with something. If I looked something up and it's, oh, I did this, it's, oh yeah, that was good. So I'm actually giving myself a signal about myself. You don't remember your past so completely. And this is not conventional economics, but it's, there's a line in this book that I use to teach game theory. It's Joel Watson, who's at UC San Diego. And there's this notion of perfect recall in game theory, which means you know what's happened before. However, he says there's this idea of imperfect recall, which you don't remember. He said some game theorists have been interested in studying imperfect recall, but they seem to have lost their notes. So I know one time I was at a big sporting event, and I couldn't remember where I parked my car. It was very nice. I never did remember where I parked my car. You know what I did? I waited for everybody to leave. And there was my car. So, yeah.
There's an issue about memory, and it goes something like this. The fact that somebody is less able or unable to recall a specific memory does not mean that they have not learned.
I agree with you.
Earlier
I agree with you completely. I actually believe that everybody has all their memories in their system, they just can't find them or access them. I have a trick memory. I actually remember a visual thing. There's a Mexican restaurant in town that does takeout, and they have a takeout menu, but the numbers are curly and brown and they're small. I couldn't remember. So I got a white sheet of paper. I wrote it in big numbers, 571 6000. I can see it really easily in my mental screen. I just recall it. It's something that I've always had. It's kind of useful, but I think everybody actually has this. So it could be that you actually have the memories and they've influenced you, but you can't recall them. I think that's exactly right. And a lot of the mnemonics type stuff is actually trying to teach you techniques to remember things. But I think everybody has the memories in there. How could you not have the memory in there? It's just that filing systems are bad. That's my thinking.
I'm afraid we're actually over time, so we need to wrap the discussion.
Thanks again.